So regarding the context, as I told you on the first day, I'm working on a project that is a part of like wider consortium. The project is led by Central European University and Jasmina Lukic as primary investigator, but actually it's a huge consortium of 8 universities that are, so in the title of the project is European Literature and Gender from a Transnational Perspective. And actually, like all of the positions within the projects are dealing with the intersecting fields of gender studies, literary studies, translation studies, and European studies. And I have decided to present only like several main objectives, even though there are more. So like what are the main objectives of the whole project that is gonna last for 4 years is to map the field of transnational literary studies in Europe with gender as a key analytical concept. Also to propose an interdisciplinary and intersectional framework for a theory of transnational literature. And the specific task of my position within the project is to trace or to map transnational women's literature and its travels. So points of entry and pathways, especially in the region of Central and Eastern Europe. So I have decided to deal, this is my working title, so it's Fictions or Frictions of Mobility, Transnational Metafiction as a genre in the work of contemporary women writers from the Western Balkans. And I know that there are like problematic terms here in the sense that I do not take Western Balkans as unproblematic regions, but for now I just needed to like frame it more or less geographically, and I'm also still reading some of the novels to decide like which novels and authors I want to include. But they're like the 2 main features of all of these novels. So one main feature is translation of cultural codes from communities of origin to destination communities and vice versa. Why? Because all of the authors that I'm analyzing are coming from the Western Balkans, but they are actually migrant authors who are usually living in the countries of the so-called Western Europe, let's say, and mostly they're writing in their second language. So, and their work also thematize migration and also cultural encounters. Another main feature of these works is engagement in complex relationship with the classical works of predominantly male authors of the Western literary canon. So that was the thing that I mentioned before. Most of these novels are actually having the very explicitly model novel that they're rewriting. And Barbi Marković is maybe like one of the most extreme cases of this rewriting, and I will turn back to it. But I want to discuss, and also like I would really appreciate your feedback because this is a beginning of my research. So I'm really open to comments and critique. I would really like to hear your opinion. But yeah, like in cooperation with Jasmina Lukic, when we were discussing all of these features, I realized that we might be dealing with something that might be interpreted as a subgenre. So I use Friedman's definitions of fictions of mobility as the novels or literary works that are thematizing within their plot issues of migration or intercultural encounters. So in that sense, this body of works that I'm analyzing can be interpreted as transnational literature in all of its definitions by now that are known to me. So, as I said, Friedman defines it as culturally translational works. Also, Paul J is defining it as cross-cultural and cross-border experiences. And also, I'm using the concept of born translated by Rebecca Wolkowitz, because all of these novels are, in Wolkowitz's terms, in a sense, born translated, which means that they're either written in a second language, they use mixture of language within the novel, or they're dealing with translation. Like like within the plots, we have translators as characters, and then metafictional, but also meta-translational, thinking about how translation is even possible. So in some sense, all of these novels can be defined as born translated. But also, I was wondering, okay, I'm choosing these novels for some reason, and I'm not using of the all of the fictions of mobility that are known to me, but I'm using especially this one that has some mutual features. And these mutual features are actually features of postmodern metafiction. So most of these works can also be interpreted through that lens. And I use interpretation of postmodern metafiction or historiographic metafiction as Linda Hutcheon defines it. So I will just give some main characteristics of it. So what Patricia calls intertextual overkill, that is something what is happening within these novels, because we have the novels that are related one-on-one. For example, it is a rewriting of Flaubert. So it is a rewriting of Madame Bovary. It is a rewriting of some other novel. But then also within the plot, we have the characters who are translators, who are passionate readers of the Western canon and literature, and they're constantly reminding us of the presence of the past, let's say, but they're also using the same techniques because so they have this sort of like self-reflexivity in a sense that they think about the form, like characters or narrators think about the form, they experiment with the form. Just a second. So yeah, they experiment with the form, and also we have that sort of like presence of documentary materials or any sort of like presence of social reality in a sense that they're trying to destroy the illusion of fiction of that world by introducing constantly, let's say, political context. So some of the authors that I'm planning to analyze are Barbi Marković, Maša Dabić, Anjelda Ibrahimi, Ornella Vorpsi, Dora Šustić, Lana Bastašić. I'm still thinking about some other authors. I'm not sure, so I didn't introduce them here. But maybe we can discuss. Maybe you can give me some suggestions. So, for example, Barbi Marković writes in German, and Hilda Ibrahimi is Albanian who writes in Italian language, and so on. And yes, now I want to introduce Barbi Marković and then move to the analysis of the novel. So Barbi started her career in Belgrade, and she had, in that phase, she had like her first novel Going Out published before she moved to Vienna, I think right after the publishing of this novel. So what happens here? Going Out, or Izlaženje, Ausgehen, is poor translation of Thomas Bernhard novella Walking. So she started as a translator. She was about to translate his novella, but then she decided to intervene in the text. So she decided to change the names and the gender of the characters. So instead of male persons in Vienna, we have three girls in Belgrade. Bernard's characters are obsessively going walking and talking about the absurdity of life, while in Barbie's interpretation, these three girls are not going walking, but they're going clubbing. So everything changes, like some sort of, we have similar topics, similar conversations between the characters, absurdity of life, depression. Only in this case, we have that with use and abuse of drugs. So a lot of things changes, but what was the result is that we have a new novel that has the same number of sentences as the original and the same structure. And the subtitle of the novel is Novel Remix. And the interesting part of it that the novel was translated back to German. And now we have that impossible, let's say impossible, as Spivak says, impossible translation of a translation, but eventually it became popular in Austria. So when Barbi moved to Vienna, she was like already, I think the novel was translated pretty soon. And after that, this novel that I will analyze today for you is hybrid in a sense that it was written partially in Serbo-Croatian and partially in German. So that was like some sort of like transformation for her, because all of her other works are later written in German. So I decided to analyze the novel Superheroines, because I thought it would fit well to the topic of this year's conference. Because we have some sort of like female plenum within the plot. So we have the three main female characters who are also, yeah, they are superheroines, but they could be also interpreted as witches, let's say, because they have some sort of superpowers that they use, but they use it, let's say, wisely. So they need to have like meetings every Saturday. They meet at the cafe in Vienna that is called Sette Fontane, and that cafe actually exists. So like when you read the novel, you have like a lot of real places, a lot of documentary materials, prices in the shops, commercials, everything that reminds you that there are no superpowers in our reality. So their superpowers are, this is very difficult to explain, but I'll try. I'll give my best to explain, and I'll give my best not to spoil the novel if you want to read it. So their superpowers is something that they call flash of fate and erasure. So flash of fate would be their capacity to erase people's problems. So when someone is suffering, they can decide to erase the problem. And erasure is displacement, and that is a displacement to another universe. And we as readers don't know anything about it, but we know that these people are erased from this world and transferred somewhere else because their living conditions were unbearable. And they're also, like, all of these three figures are migrants who are coming from post-Yugoslav spaces, who are now living in Vienna. They try to live in different cities and decided to stay in Vienna, but they are working in precarious conditions, and all of them are having several jobs, one of which is writing a column for astrological magazine. And what is so they're writing for astrological magazine, and there is a reason for that, because they're dealing with individual destinies of marginalized citizens of Vienna. What is the catch with these powers? They cannot erase someone who is very important, some political figure, because that would destabilize social reality. So they decide to erase marginalized people who are who don't have so many social connections. So the world, like the universe, will not change that much. And also they're using, like, the reason why they are writing a column for astrological magazine is because they invite the readers to invest their energy into thinking about these people. And in some way they're using let's say that the energy of these communities, of readers, of the magazine, is used as strength that can make their powers stronger. So that's how they do it. But their ancestors, like grandmother Maria, so grandmother of one of the characters, and also Rabia, who was a supervisor, also one of the characters, were not that cautious at all. So they would destabilize countries. They would erase some important politicians, for example, or some people who are exploiting persons. So in that sense, they would completely unstabilize like political circumstances, but we don't know anything about it because we live in a universe where these people never existed. And when I was thinking about them, they are superheroines, but like in Greek mythology sense of heroes, they commit no favors. So they don't destabilize social orders. So they're trying to remain invisible. But at the same time, there's some sort of like Moira, there's some sort of like godlike figures who cannot help themselves to transgress the class. And at the beginning of the novel, we hear from the narrator, who is also one of the main characters, that the novel will end, so this is from the beginning, not from the end, so I'm not going to spoil the end. So that the resolution of their troubles ends up in neoliberal robot self-tracking astronautic happy end. And what we get from them through the novel is that we had no possibility of thinking otherwise when we are working or when they are working as overqualified servants employed to the black market. So when they're focusing only on everyday survival, they have no opportunity to think about the world. And what is for them ideal of middle class life is that you have enough time to develop interest for politics, that you can discuss politics and think about change. But you can also think about develop interest for cosmos, and you can develop interest for gardening. So that is something that they perceive as an ideal. And also practicing bodily self-care, like buying cosmetic, like consumerist stuff, but also doing yoga or sports in general. And also they were discussing having children as now affordable if we transgress, because otherwise you cannot even think about having children. So in a sense, these fantastic elements that we have in a novel show us that like transgressing the class in this universe is like a fairy tale. It cannot be done without magic. And also what is most disturbing is that we are constantly, like the narration is constantly interrupted with documentary materials that are real documentary materials that the author has collected in these different cities that are mentioned within the plot. So we have the real prices of food or goods in Sarajevo, in Berlin, in Belgrade, and we are constantly reminded of that presence of our social world in this fictional world. And when I started thinking about the topic of this conference, it somehow happened accidentally that at the same time I was reading this novel, and that I went to see the exhibition, by Denise Freira da Silva and Mona Neumann, I think, at Kunsthalle Wien, and somehow these things blended when I was thinking about like imagining otherwise or imagining the end to the world as we know it. And At the exhibition, they are thematizing the issue of exploitation of resources in Chile, for example, or exploitation of work. They're thematizing also like the colonial past and the connection between colonialism and neocolonialism. And there was one particular picture at the exhibition that stayed with me for a long time. So, and it is not from the main film, which title is the same as the exhibition, Ancestral Claims, Ancestral Clouds, but from one of the accompanying videos, where, so they thematize 4 elements, and air as an element is thematized as clouds, as microorganism or biodiversity that is happening within the clouds. But in this particular video, one cloud contained a ship of transatlantic slave trade, in which were the people who will become slaves in the Americas. And the voices that were covering the video were discussing how the ancestors are present materially today with us in this world through their work. So the voices are trying to draw attention that the force of work of people who were enslaved is still present physically with us in accumulation of wealth and accumulation of power. So that is something very physical. And maybe that's not pretty much new for you, but for me, it was really revealing how physical force of exploited people actually creates something very, very big. And when we are thinking about imagining the world otherwise, or creating the world otherwise, I'm trying to think about what would happen if that huge amount of work that is nowadays exploited could be directed somewhere else. So for me, that gives me a sort of hope, because this novel, I mean, the robotic happy end is not pretty much happy end, because the world is not shaped at all. But then this possibility to have your freedom by being middle class enables you to think how we can imagine the world and start working on it otherwise. Thank you.